am at the final little bit to cut before I start adding everything into the jars. I am doing a raw pack, so all my vegetables will go into the jars raw, and I will add boiling broth to it. It's recommended that the jars be hot that you're adding the stuff into, because otherwise you risk them cracking when the hot liquid gets added in and when they go into the pressure canner. With vegetable soup, or with most items that you can, you have to do pressure canning, because botulism does not get killed when you just hot water bath it. High acidic foods can be water bathed, but in this case it cannot. It'll have to be pressure canned. For my vegetable soup, we will have carrots, peppers, onions, peas, beans, and tomatoes. Once it's put in the pressure canner, you wait until it reaches pressure, and then it cooks in the canner for an hour. We typically can in pint-sized jars because we found that would serve as a perfect one-serving meal. Now for the canning. You've got your jars in the bath canner. Since I don't need that right now because I'll be using the pressure canner, I like to set the jars in the rack and keep it above the water as it's boiling. It makes the jars warm. They're not too hot to touch, but it helps keep them warm enough so that they don't crack when all the pressure riser starts getting too hot. It's recommended that you boil the lids. It helps kill any microorganisms that are on there. Makes them a little more sterile. So you'll grab the jar, add all your cold raw ingredients, and then you will add your broth. They do make a funnel, which makes this a lot easier. It's a wide mouth funnel. You just add that on, and you can just dump your broth right on in. You want to leave about 1 inch of room at the top. They also make this nifty tool. This is to help remove any air from the can. So you just kind of go along the edges, move it up and down a little bit. Helps get any trapped air out. Even with liquid items, you should still do this. You can add more liquid if you need to after doing that. This actually freed up a little bit more space for us, so we can add more liquid into this jar. Now again, my vegetables are raw packed because the pressure riser will run for about an hour at a very high pressure, so it will cook the vegetables while it's canning. You do not need to sterilize the rings, since those do not touch. Like, you do not need to sterilize the rings because those are not touching any of the food items. If you had gotten some food on the ring or rim of your jar, you'd wipe that down before putting the lid on. But you close up the jar, and then you'll set it inside the pressure canner. Okay, all of our jars are filled up. That batch of about 28 cups of beef broth made about 21 pint jars. So you put them all into the pressure cooker. Mine comes with a rack, so you can do 2 layers of this size jar. You close up your pressure cooker. Now when you start off, you want to take your valve off. Until you actually start getting steam out of the top here, you do not want the valve on. You seal, and then you get your pot to start a boil. Mine has about 2 inches of water at the bottom. That's what my pot recommended. All pots can vary. Once you start getting steam, you'll add that valve back on. Once the valve starts to rock, you turn your heat down to about medium heat so that it only simmers, and you start your timer for an hour. For those watching, there are a couple tidbits I had forgotten to mention. Most that can food would understand and know this already, but you cannot use the jars that pickles come in or spaghetti sauce. You have to use a approved canning jar. We use ball mason jars. They're meant for this type of stuff. Also, you do not need to add salt when you're canning. It is believed that you need that to preserve the food. It is not needed. You can add salt, but you don't need to. Once your pressure has been met and you've had it cooking for an hour at pressure, you then turn the stove off and let it self-regulate to its normal temperature. Don't open it right away. Let it kind of release its own steam on its own time. After it's been sitting for a while, it's been sitting for about a half hour for me, you then can open your pot and remove all your glass jars. There's a nifty little tool to use to pick up the jars so you don't burn yourself. Do not set the glass jars on the counter. Set it on a towel. Too fast of a cool down will cause a jar to crack, so always make sure they go on a towel. After you get done with canning and they've sat for a while, you need to check the seals. This tool helps to hold the jar if they're nicely and tight screwed. You unscrew the top, and all you really have to do is just pull. See if the top comes loose. If it does not, it's sealed. If it does, you need to re-pressurize it. You must pressurize within 24 hours. So you need to check it before that time is up, otherwise the can will end up being garbage. After that, you label them, put them on your shelf, and eat them. Once you've removed your jars from the pressure canner and placed them on the towels, they will stay like that for the next 12 to 24 hours. You do not want to tamper around with the bands too much or move them too much. You'll hear a lot of popping during this time. As the jars start to seal, you'll hear the pop. After 12 to 24 hours, you'll unscrew the band and check the seal. Mine have not sat that long yet, so I can't do it. But you would literally unscrew the top, and then you pull on the metal seal that goes around it and see if you hear any popping, whispering of air, or if the top just comes off. If any of that happens, it did not seal properly. You have basically 24 hours to re-can them. So if it did not seal, wipe the rim, because there's a good chance it was something that was on that rim preventing a seal. And you can reheat the jar, put the contents back in a new jar, reheat the lid, put everything back on, Throw it back in that pressure canner for the hours again, like you did before, just that 1 hour. If it does not seal that time, you'll be over your time limit. You only have 24 hours to save it, basically. Or you can put it in the fridge and still eat it. It's still safe in that first 24 hours. You're obviously going to have some cans that just don't seal properly, and you may lose some contents. But once you know the seals are good, keep the band off. You don't keep that on when it's stored, because by keeping it on, you can cause the seal to break again. Label your jars and enjoy them. Now that I've got to wait for this stuff to be done, I've personally started to do applesauce. The process of doing the applesauce at this time, I have a bowl here. I put 2 cups of water, 2 tablespoons of lemon juice. This is what I'm soaking the apples in for 5 minutes after coring them to help prevent browning. Because we all know apples, once they get exposed to air, tend to start to brown. First I'm peeling the apples, and then I'm coring the apples and quartering them. This is more than a quarter because of the corer I'm using, but you press down. Doesn't always work perfect because these things are not 100% flat. The ones that aren't perfect, I've been taking the knife too, just to kind of take out that centerpiece. Then it goes inside that bath that I showed. They'll stay in there for about 5 minutes. The lemon juice does not affect the flavoring. It just helps prevent the browning. Once that is done, it goes into this pot. We'll boil this until it gets soft so we can mash the apples. I'm using Fiji apples, Gala apples, and Honeycrisp, or Gala, however you pronounce it. But I will come back in the process later to show how it's made, and again, this will be getting canned. Now once the apples are soft, you remove them from the water and put them into a bowl, and you can either hand mash them or you can put them through a food processor. I'm hand mashing them until you get the consistency you'd like. Food processor will give you a smoother applesauce. Hand mashing will give you a little bit more of a chunky. Both will equally work. Now that I've got it all mashed up to the consistency I want, I add a cup and a half of sugar, or sugar to taste. I'm just going to do a cup first and see what it tastes like, because I don't want to add too much. You also do 2 tablespoons worth of lemon juice. This is for a recipe that had about 2 bags worth of apples in it. The recipe I'm following is for 4 bags worth. I cut it in half because I only did 2 bags worth. You stir that up. I do see a couple spots that I need to mash a little bit better. So I'm just going to do that fast. mine did come out with more of a consistency of a nice lumpy, thick applesauce instead of the real fine applesauce. I'm just going to grab a spoon so I can see if that's enough sugar, since I did put less in than it called for. It is good, but I think they could take that other half.
You don't know why?
Seemed like a little bit too much sugar, so I didn't want to add it all at once.
You can't get me again.
No, I do promise
This is a consistency that you have to put in hot, into hot cans again. I've currently got my lids and my cans boiling, or working on getting them boiling. I have to reheat this up.
Why are you doing this in front of my kids? Yeah, we already know. We already did.
I already told me.
What?
I had to re-clean that spoon so I can taste test it again.
It's so good.
No, I don't know. I need to say hi.
It's about perfect consistency,
Guys,
perfect flavor. So now you just return the heat to a medium. Let this get to a nice little boil, and then set it down to low so it stays heating but not boiling while you fill up your jars. Now I was going to show the canning process of the applesauce, but I made half of the apples just because I ran out of time. The kids taste tested it and they all want to eat it. I don't think I'll have much to can. I'm going to put a jar in the fridge. There's a good chance what is left is not going to be enough to actually can. Now with applesauce, because you put the lemon juice in, which helps increase the acidity, this is something that you can hot water bath. You would put it in this canner over here, about 45 minutes at a boil, and then you take it out. Same thing with the others. You sit it out for 12 to 24 hours to seal. Once it seals, it's good to go. Maybe tomorrow I'll be able to actually do a full canning process on applesauce, because I still have apples to make, but I don't think the kids are going to allow me to can much of what I just made.
You want cookies?
Considering children like her are about to eat it. Well, it has been about 15 to 17 hours since the vegetable soup was canned. As I said, you have to wait at least 12 hours to check the seals, up to 24 hours. But to check the seals, you just take off the band. If it's too tight to get off, they do make this tool, which does help. Just hold it like that. I'm going to do it over the counter just in case it slips. Once you get the band off, all you're really doing is you're checking to make sure that this does not come off easily by pulling on it. Not extremely hard, but just kind of pull. Make sure there's no popping noise if you press down on the lid. You also shouldn't have heard air escaping when you pulled the band off. If everything's good, they recommend you store without the band. I'm just putting it back on real light so that it doesn't put any pressure down on the seal itself. If you put the band on tight, it will push the seal and it will cause the seal to come loose. But this can is good. If you do come across a can that is bad, you have up to 24 hours after the initial canning to recan it. So you always want to check this before that 24 hours is up, so you can throw it back in the pressure canner and make sure it's still good. Again, this one is good. I'm just going to lightly put this lid back on. You will occasionally get a bad seal. I had one yesterday I actually did open up because the band or the top had bent. So it was letting some air in. Again, no noise. But you do that with all your cans. Then you just label the top of the jar, and you can later eat it when you're wanting to. No need to refrigerate it until it's opened. It's preserved in this jar. But hopefully this video helped you on how to can vegetable soup, and you enjoy it. Okay, as promised, I did get another batch of applesauce made. Showing you how it gets canned. Grab the jar from the canner so it's hot. You want to leave about a ½ inch of space from the top of the can. This is actually cinnamon applesauce that I did. You again use the spatula to help remove the air. Top on, and then your ring. I'd already removed all my tops from the water. You don't have to screw it on extremely tight. Like I said, with applesauce, you can that in the water bath instead of in a pressure canner. So I'll just put the jar right back into the water bath canner until I have all my cans in there. They will go in the water bath at a boil for about 30 minutes, and then you take them out, and same thing with the vegetable soup. You let it sit for the 12 to 24 hours to check the seals. I did forget to mention, even though it should be kind of self-explanatory, once your water is boiling in your canner, you need to lower your jars into the water so that the water covers the top of the jars. Then you cover the pot with your lid, and you let that boil for 20 to 30 minutes. Once it's done, you raise the jars up, let them stay on the cooling rack for the time being. Then you move it over to the towel, just like the other jars. Again, you don't want to cool them too fast. You put them on a cold counter, they might crack.